Hi, and welcome to the Terillium presentation of Transportation Management Lite. This is an overview of how using the basic tools and basic configuration in transportation can help us to streamline sales order processing. My name is Bernadette Dallamiller. I'm a solution architect with Terillium. I've been working with JD Edwards for 25 years and consulting with Terillium for 17. And transportation is one of my favorite, very flexible solutions that we can use in conjunction with sales order processing. So a quick intro here. If you would like to get a copy of this presentation deck, then if you scan the QR code, you can fill in the form and that will auto email a copy of the presentation deck to you. In addition to having the intro slides, there's a full set of slides that walks through some background information of what I'm going to show in the demo, along with the screenshots of the demonstration so that you can see it without having to go back through the entire recording. And here's what I'm going to cover. So Transportation Management Lite, what does that even mean? Because it's a term that we've kind of brought about internally at Terillium to describe how we use the basic features of transportation to leverage the bulk of the functionality when it comes to sales order processing. Talk a little bit about what it can do for you, why you should consider using this module if you're dealing with sales order, shipment, distribution. And then I'm going to go through the bulk of the presentation is going to be in JD Edwards, looking at actual use of the transportation module as it sits alongside sales order processing. So we'll talk about how shipments get generated in the first place, how those shipment numbers get assigned, how we can manage consolidation and deconsolidation of shipments. So if you have multiple sales orders that you need to be able to ship to the same destination at the same time, how we can go about building those into consolidated shipments. I'll talk a very little bit about basic required configuration, just what you need to get started. There's going to be a companion webinar to this that will take an under the covers look at the configuration that you need to be able to drive these processes that I'm showing today. This is enough to kind of get you going and help you understand whether it's useful to you. The companion presentation will be the actual configuration that you would need to get started. We'll talk a little bit about delivery documents, how we can use transportation to make it easier to generate the paperwork that we need to go with shipments. Capturing appointment information. So it's something that without transportation, we kind of struggle to find a place to put that information. How we can manage entry of payable and billable freight charges, and then what that does downstream for us once we get past shipment confirmation. And then I'm going to take a look at how we can use shipment processing to keep our sales order lines in sync with one another. That includes both making sure, kind of like a ship complete scenario for sales orders, but also one of the things that we can struggle with from a sales order management perspective is if we're shipping product, but we've also got non-product lines on sales orders. That can be if you're putting freight on up front, if you've got miscellaneous charges or credits, things like labor charges. How do we keep those lines in sync with the rest of the shipment so that we don't end up invoicing lines separate from the rest of the shipment? And then at the end, I'll talk through some additional considerations for why Transportation Lite is a great place to start, but all the other things that you can grow into as you start using the module. So real quick, and this is a busy slide because the truth is Transportation Lite can solve a lot of business problems. As I said, it's leveraging basic transportation management setup and functionality to get the most bang for the buck in giving us tools that we can use to manage our sales orders and our shipments. One of the biggest advantages that it gives us is we're able to give the warehouse and we're able to give shipping groups their own place to go look for the information that they need. Rather than having to focus on using the sales order to know when to do what, now we've got a different mechanism that we can use for the warehouse to give them much simplified visibility to what they need to do. We're able to automate carrier assignment. So things like if you have small parcel shipments and you know that for certain customers, anything that's under 150 pounds, you're going to ship small parcel. And maybe your customers have a carrier preference. So some of them want to ship UPS, some of them want to ship FedEx. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about automating carrier assignment. Rules that sit in the background that tell us when we enter a sales order how we want to route that order for a particular customer, a particular branch plan, a particular scenario. And like I said, we're able to use customer preferred carriers. A lot of times what I see is sales order notes being used to say, if it's this scenario, if it's under 150 pounds, use this carrier. If it's this, use this carrier. This now systematizes it and takes all of the order entry manual effort and proneness to error out of the picture. As I mentioned, it allows us to consolidate shipments across multiple different sales orders. It provides some controls. So one of the things that I'm going to talk about is that shipments follow a separate status designation compared to the sales order. And we're able to put some controls in place about who is able to do what and when, not just using sales order statuses, but on the warehouse and shipping side through these shipment statuses. If you're doing EDI and you're using an ASN, an 856, it gives you a much cleaner way to identify what is a shipment. Especially if you're consolidating across multiple orders, it can become kind of difficult to figure out how to identify what your shipment identifier is when you're pulling that data. The ability to capture billable and payable shipping charges at the shipment level. So a lot of places you're putting freight charges onto sales orders. What's missing a lot of the time is the ability to also capture the payable charge component that goes with that, so that when you're getting freight bills from the carrier, you're able to make sure that you're paying what you expected to pay. In addition to just straight up freight charges, you've also got the ability to capture additional freight components. So if you have things like fuel surcharges, if you're doing liftgate services or special Saturday deliveries or anything like that, anything where you would want to apply either an upcharge or a discount to the customer, you can also capture that through the shipping charges. Shipment reference numbers gives us a place to actually put that data. Tracking numbers, a lot of times you're trying to put them onto sales order lines, or you're having to do custom tables to capture this data. When you're using transportation, even the Lite configuration, you've got a home to put that data. And you've got a simple way, as I already mentioned, to manage pickup and delivery appointments if you want to have visibility to that. So a couple of slides as to why consider it, and I'll talk to these points as we go through. I already mentioned you can have rule-based assignment of carriers. It's not just based on the actual getting from and to, it's also date-based. So a lot of times when we're entering a requested date on a sales order, we're not necessarily treating that as the requested delivery date it is. When we're using transportation, we've got the ability to very simply manage transit times that are associated with shipping routes. We've got the ability to specify prep days that we need in the warehouse. So when we enter a sales order line and we route the shipment, two things happen. One, we can make sure that we assign a carrier and a shipping route that gets it to the customer on time. And we can also make sure that we are scheduling those dates on the sales order to reflect accurately when we plan to deliver, when we plan to ship, and when that means we need to pick in the warehouse. We can automate date calculation by customer and or carrier. So kind of like I mentioned, you can set up transit periods, prep days, and those can be carrier specific, branch specific, customer specific. We've got a lot of flexibility in how we do that. I'll show generation of delivery documents. One of the big advantages there is we typically know if we've got an export ship to that we're shipping to. A lot of times I see the warehouse having to make sure that they're externally generating export paperwork to go with the shipment. Through delivery documents, we're able to make sure that we don't just generate things like bills of lading and packing lists. We can also automate the generation of other shipping related documents like export paperwork. And I'll talk about shipment approval and how that gives us better visibility from a shipment status perspective. I mentioned keeping stock and non-stock lines in sync on a sales order. I mentioned the ASNs. Mentioned that it gives shipping a good place to have their own applications and their own place to actually manage order fulfillment and shipping. And at this point, I am going to jump into the demo. And one of the things that I want to make clear is a lot of times if you're implementing new functionality in JD Edwards, it's a really big deal to implement a new way of costing or a new way of doing inventory management. With Transportation Lite, it's very simple to implement this in a live environment. And it gives you the ability to put in a super light, almost a skinny instance of transportation that allows you to start getting maximum benefit from it, and then over time be able to grow into more of the functionality. I'll talk about shipment status when we get into the demo. What I wanted to show is kind of the normal thing that we're used to seeing is this top line that represents what my sales order through release to the warehouse, through allocation, shipping, and everything, what that looks like. And this would normally be associated with status changes on my sales order. What I'm showing on the bottom line is that I've got the ability, as I go through different points in the process, to have shipment status changes that are also happening. And we've got the capability when we do a shipment status change to say either I do want to update the sales order status or I only want to update my shipment status. So there can be process steps that you go through in the warehouse where you want to make it very clear to somebody that's looking at a sales order that this event has now occurred. So for example, if you start picking and that is your cutoff point, no more order changes. Once you update the status to say, I'm starting picking, now that is completely off limits for anybody to be able to make changes to the sales order. And similarly on the shipment side, you can also set rules about at what shipment status you're no longer able to make changes to your shipments. And it's very flexible. So this is representing something more like an LTL or a truckload status flow. You can also make it look a little bit different. So if you've got a slightly different status flow that needs to happen if you're doing small parcel shipping. So for example, if you're extracting data, sending to small parcel solution like UPS WorldShip, you're able, when you do that extract, to not just update the sales order status to indicate that the extract has happened. You can do a corresponding update to the shipment status so that you've got clear visibility on both sides where we're at in the process. All right, so let's get into the system because that's what we will really care about. I'm going to walk through doing shipment generation, show you what controls how shipment numbers are going to get assigned, what the process looks like for consolidating and deconsolidating shipments. I'll talk about that shipment approval process and show you that we've got two ways of doing it. We've got a manual process. We've also got the capability to do it as a batch process. Talk a little bit about how we can manage just general shipment related revisions and how that can push data back to the sales order rather than vice versa. We'll talk about entry of billable and payable freight. I'll talk about those document sets and generating shipment paperwork. And then we'll finish up with a little bit looking at shipment reference numbers. All right, so let me get into my JD Edwards system. And the first thing that we're going to look at is what controls how shipment numbers are going to be assigned. Different businesses are going to have different requirements for what happens with shipment numbering when we enter a sales order. And as soon as my system gets in here, okay, so I'm going to start off in the transportation constants. And the first thing in transportation, assuming that we've actually turned on the System 49 module, is I'm going to set up what are called shipment depots. So my branch plant ties into a shipment depot, and I'm going to look at shipment depot 30. So a lot of the time, if it's a one-to-one relationship, you're going to call your shipment depot the same as you're going to call your branch plant. And one of the things that you're going to realize as I go through some of these screens is I'm showing you a really small portion of what is going on with configuration, which also turns into I'm showing you a really small portion of what's capable from a system functionality perspective. So what I want to show you here is really down at this bottom left-hand side is the shipment consolidation mode. There's multiple different ways that we can tell the system to try to consolidate shipments. So right now, I've got it checked to be single order consolidation. What that's going to do is when I enter a sales order, it's going to look at my sales order lines and figure if it's capable of putting all of those lines onto one shipment. And what's going to control that is basically everything that's going to affect transportation. It's where I'm shipping from. It's where I'm shipping to. It is the freight terms, the mode of transport, the carrier. It is everything that's going to affect, and dates. If I've got something that's going to ship tomorrow and I've got something that's going to ship next week, clearly I'm not going to ship those on the same shipment. So it's taking all of these things that would require us to plan shipment separately and only breaking out when it's absolutely necessary for shipment planning. If all of my lines are going from the same place to the same place with the same carrier on the same date, it's going to put all of those lines onto the same shipment. Multiple order consolidation says, I don't care what sales order this is on. When I enter it, I'm going to look to see if there is already a shipment that exists that is going from that branch to the same destination with the same carrier on the same dates. And if it finds one, it's going to consolidate my new sales order line onto an existing shipment. Transactional consolidation says, I'm going to try to assign a shipment number to everything that you do in this one sales order entry transaction. So if I start off a sales order and I put 3 lines on it and they all get the same shipment number, if I come back into that same sales order 5 minutes later and I add a new line onto it, I've now done a new transaction and it's going to put that new transaction onto a separate shipment number. So at that point, it stops trying to take new lines and consolidate them onto an existing shipment. The last one is no consolidation. It assumes that I'm going to manually be looking to see what I can consolidate across every single line on a sales order. If I enter 100 lines on a sales order, I'm going to get 100 different shipment numbers. And then in the backside of it, when I'm trying to do my shipment planning, then I would be figuring out which lines I want to consolidate and ship together. So for right now, I'm going to stick with my single order consolidation. And there's one more important thing before we get into entering a sales order and looking at how these shipment numbers get assigned. So the 49 SD UDC table controls which sales order line type combinations are going to get a shipment number assigned to them. So for example, if I want to see everything on a sales order, an SO order type that is going to get a shipment number assigned to it. I'm going to look for everything that starts with SO, and then I can see that my D lines, N lines, S lines, and W lines are all going to get a shipment number assigned to them. And when that happens and the shipment is created, this is what's going to drive the starting status when my shipment is created. So as an example, if I don't want my direct shipments to get a shipment number assigned to them, I would not have this record sitting in my UDC table. And then when I created a D line on an SO sales order, it would not create a shipment number for me. All right, so let's move into sales order entry. And I'm going to enter a simple sales order. And I'm using demo data here, so everything is demo customers and bicycles and bicycle parts. And for my first shipment, I'm going to put a date that's a couple of weeks out. And what I want to show you is when I look at the payment and freight information for this order, at this point, I've pulled in the default values from my customer. So if I have a customer that is always going to ship with one specific carrier, I could have that carrier number be pulled in from the customer master, and then that would force that carrier number to be used when we get into transportation. When I leave it blank like this, at the point that the shipment is being created, the system is going to look to see if it's got a route available that it can use to ship this order to the customer, meeting all of the criteria, including that delivery date. So I'm going to put a couple of lines on here. Put a couple of finished goods items. And then because I want to show you what we can do with keeping stock and non-stock lines in sync, I'm also going to put a non-stock line on here for a labor charge. And you'll see that that is going to be an N line type. And what we're going to see as we go through this process is that it's going to follow a different status flow, but at the end, we're going to catch it all back up before we ship confirm this order. So at this point, you'll see that all of my dates are the same. When we're using transportation, the preferences that control order prep days and transit days don't apply. So as soon as you turn on transportation, those two preferences stop applying, and instead it starts to come from transportation. When I place this order, the transportation module is going to hit its logic and figure out the best way to be able to route this to get it to the customer. I do have the ability, if I want to, I can actually route it manually within sales order entry if I want to see those date impacts at the point of order entry. But typically you're going to let the system do it, because that's one of the points of using transportation, is it takes the human decision making out of it. So let me save this order. And it's going to take just a minute because we've got it doing a few things in the background. All right, so now my sales order has been created. And all of those lines were created shipping from the same place, shipping to the same place, same dates. And so it's not really a surprise that all of those lines, since I've got single order consolidation turned on, all of those lines got assigned to the same shipment number. But now if we look over at our dates, now I can see that the customer, they did request an 11/6 delivery date, but now what the system has done is it's back scheduled from there. So it said, I'm looking to deliver this to the customer on 11/6. I know, because I set the route up, that there's a 1-day transit period. So it is back scheduling 1 day to say, after I ship it, I need to have 24 hours to get this to the customer to be able to deliver it. And then I've also got a scheduled pick date set up here. So it's telling me that in order to ship this on time, I need to pick this on November 1st. Now, one of the things that is great with transportation is you're able to use multiple workday calendars. If you're using preferences to do this, you've really only got the ability to use one workday calendar for all of the entities that are involved. You can have a separate workday calendar from your branch workday calendar, but then everybody has to adhere to it. When we're using transportation, each entity that's involved, if you want to get that complicated, can have their own workday calendar. So if you have customers that only allow pickups and shipments on certain days, if you have customers that only allow deliveries on certain days, you're able to set up a workday calendar to manage that. Similarly for carriers, if you have some carriers that only pick up Monday through Friday, you can set up carrier workday calendars that will only use carriers that are able to pick up on days that will still get the product to the customer on time. So my guess here is that this ship date, scheduled pick date, is probably going over a weekend, which is why I've got 4 days here instead of just a couple of days. We'll take a look at that when we get into the routing side. You can also see that at this point, I have a carrier number assigned. So when the shipment was created, the system did find a routing, it assigned the carrier number, and it determined that based on either dimensions or the weight of this product, it needs to go LTL. It can't ship small parcel. So now I've got a carrier and a mode of transport assigned to it. Okay, so that is my my shipment generation. Let's go and take a look at shipment consolidation. So at this point, I should tell you that we're going to go into a different application. So the P4915 is the shipment workbench, the work with shipments application. And typically speaking, you're going to have different versions of that program for different people that are interacting with the shipments. As an example, from sales order entry through a row exit, one of my options is to go to work with shipment. So this is typically the version that I would want to have my customer service people using, and it's probably only going to show me shipments that are still at a status that is within the jurisdiction of customer service. Once they get past a shipment status where customer service shouldn't be doing with them, then we wouldn't give them straightforward visibility to it. All right, so I'm going to go into that same work with shipments. So you'll see here, I've got one work with shipments application that is going to be used by my customer service reps. And down here, I've got one that I'm going to use when I get into the warehouse process steps. And where shipment consolidation happens completely depends on your business and your business rules and business processes. In some businesses I work with, it's customer service who are looking at order dates and delivery dates and figuring out what should get consolidated to ship together. In other cases, it's a downstream shipping function. And so you basically choose to give the capability to do this to the roles that actually needed to do it. And I have my order number here, so I can pull up and I can see this is the shipment that I just created from that sales order. And what I'm going to do is go look for additional shipments that the system would allow me to consolidate onto it. So basically it's going to be having to go from the same branch plant to the same customer destination. In addition to showing me orders with the same dates, it'll show me past due shipments. So if I maybe had back-ordered shipments that are shipping late, it'll give me the capability to consolidate those shipments onto this one. So I'm going to go and add/remove sales order lines. I would go to the same place to do either a consolidation or a deconsolidation. And right now, these are the 3 sales order lines that are on shipment 5330. From here, I'm going to go and select other order lines that are eligible to get consolidated with this. And so these are currently going ascending. I've got my most recent shipments and my most recent sales orders are at the top of the list. And as I go down the list, they're older and older and more past due. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this top shipment and I am going to say I want to select that order line. And when I close out of here, now I've gone from having 3 sales order lines on here. Now I see I've got 4. And this shipment has now, this sales order line has now been consolidated onto shipment 5330. Now, what's going to happen is the shipment that you're choosing as your starting point is going to drive the dates. So if I choose to consolidate a sales order or a sales order line that had different dates on it, when I do the consolidation, I'm saying I now want to make the dates match what this original shipment was. So if I had something that was maybe supposed to ship last week, and now that product is just becoming available, when I select it, it's going to update so that my scheduled pick date, my promised ship date, and my promised delivery date now match the other lines that were already on that shipment. That can be a good thing. That can be something that you have to be very, very cautious of when you're doing this. So now if I bounce back to my sales order inquiry screen, instead of looking at that sales order number, now if I start looking based on shipment number, I'm able to see that I've got more than just that one sales order that are associated to that shipment. And so now when I'm managing my shipment, I'm not managing to an individual sales order. I can be managing across as many different sales orders as you've chosen to consolidate onto that shipment. All right, so let's start talking about approvals. One of the places that I tend to find that there's a little bit of confusion about is, when is customer service done working with a sales order, and when is it okay for the warehouse to have visibility to it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this shipment number, and I'm going to go into my work with shipments version that is targeted at the warehouse. And what this is doing is I've got a query in here that is showing me only shipments that are at a status 25. And that is also, I just don't have any at status 15. It's showing me anything from a status 15 through a status 70. So this is going to be anything that customer service has said, warehouse, it's now under your control, all the way through when I complete shipping this. But right now, if I look at that shipment number that I just created, I don't see it in here. And that's because customer service hasn't yet done their approval step that says, warehouse, this is now yours, have at it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to my customer service version, and I'm going to do a manual approve shipment. And when I do this, I've got the capability to choose whether I'm just going to update my shipment status or whether I'm also going to update my sales order status. In this case, all I'm doing this for is just to notify the warehouse that this is now theirs. I'm not updating my sales order status when I do this. At least I don't think I am. We'll look in a second. Okay, so I'm going to approve my shipment. And this shipment approval, when you do it manually, it's normally recognition that I've completed a milestone task on this shipment. There are some transactions you can do that you can set up to automatically do it. So for example, when I generate a bill of lading downstream, one of the things that I can do is, in addition to updating my sales order status, I can also update my shipment status. A lot of times we'd use a manual shipment approval. This is a good example, release from customer service to the warehouse. The warehouse, when they've completed initial routing, so if they've got their freight quote and they've now assigned a carrier and got the freight rates into the system, they may update that shipment status to indicate to somebody else that now it's okay to go ahead and generate that shipping paperwork. So I'm going to approve my shipment. And when I do that, if I refresh it, now I'm going to see that it's at a status 15, which is ready for the warehouse. So now I'm going to go back to my warehouse screen. Put in that shipment number. And now I can see it. It was down at the bottom of the list. So once it shows up on this list, now the warehouse is aware that they can start doing their thing with it. That customer service is not planning to make any more changes to this shipment. So let's look at the sales order statuses for this shipment real quickly. I lied. When I did that approval from customer service, I actually did update that. And what you'll see here is the stock lines on that shipment updated to a next status 540. So the next thing that I'm planning to do for those lines is generate a pick ticket for them. For the non-stock line that was on there, we don't care about showing that on a pick ticket. We don't care about having it on the packing list. So I've bounced this through to a later status, and we're going to marry those lines up when we get further through the shipment process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk this one all the way through so that you see the different places that we can use transportation. I'm going to generate a pick ticket. And I have this set up so that I'm generating my pick ticket by shipment number. It doesn't have to be that way. You can still do it by sales order number if you prefer. And if I come back to my sales order, once that completes generation, okay, so now I see that my next status has updated. And if I scrolled over to the right, somewhere over here, I would see that I have got a pick ticket number assigned. Somewhere way over here. There is a pick ticket number on this at this point. So my next step is presumably going to be to start picking and packing this product. And this is a place where I think that the batch shipment approval can become really, really useful. If you're using Ship Complete, so either allow partial shipments, disallow partial shipments in the customer setup, that's only going to manage it on a sales order by sales order basis. In this case, we may want to manage that on a shipment by shipment basis. Typically speaking, if you've consolidated lines or if you've got your shipment ready for processing, you don't really want to be doing partial shipments because somebody is going to end up with greater freight charges than what would happen if you ship it complete. So this batch shipment approval, what we can do is set it up so that it is going to override the lines to a status when everything has completed that pick pack process. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a couple of the lines on this shipment and I'm going to complete the pick confirmation step on them and show you what I mean about this batch shipment approval. So I'm going to do a pick confirmation based on my shipment number. And I'm going to take two of these lines and I'm going to pick confirm them. You could have this be a pack confirmation if that is the step that you want to control. And I'm going to leave one of these lines still waiting to be pick confirmed. So if I look at my sales order, now I see that my status is updated to 550 on two of these lines, but I've still got one line that's lagging behind. It hasn't completed that picking process yet. And what I would typically do is I'd run this batch shipment confirmation on schedule in the background. And what it's doing is it's looking for shipments that are at a status 15, and it's trying to update the status to 560. And so it won't allow that to happen until 560 is an allowed status for all the lines on the sales order. So I just blind submitted that because normally this would be running in the background every 15, 30 minutes, however frequently you need it. And it's looking to see, are all my lines on the sales order on that shipment, are they all at a status that is ready for that approval? And once it's finished running, so you can see here, it finished running, my status didn't update. And it's because I've still got this line sitting at next status 545. So if I now complete that pick confirmation for that line, so now all of my lines are sitting at a next status 550. If I run that batch shipment approval again, then when it completes processing, now I'm going to see that all of those lines have updated to 560. Now I've got a very simple order activity rule flow going through this. You can do this at multiple points in the process. You can have this take lines to 555, and maybe that's your trigger for generating the shipping documents. You can have as many different sales order status changes and as many different shipment status changes as you need to support your process. And if I come back and look at my shipment, it was previously at a status 15. And when that batch shipment approval just ran, it updated it to a 25. So now this becomes an indication to somebody else somewhere in the process that I'm ready to do the next thing. That could be printing pallet labels. It could be generating your shipping paperwork. It could be arranging transportation, putting freight charges on there. So let's take a look at the shipment revisions here. So a couple of things. When we initially entered these orders, they automatically routed in the transportation setup. So they found a carrier, they found a mode of transport that was going to get it to the customer on time. If you attend the partner webinar to this, where we talk about the configuration, you'll see that there are different ways that you can drive how routes get selected. So you can control whether a route is allowed to be systematically assigned or whether it's one that you can only assign manually. You choose the hierarchy for what is considered to be a good routing. Is it based on a performance factor? Is it based on the cheapest cost? Is it based on the shortest distance? So there's multiple different ways that you can set the system up to determine what is the best route to select. I do have the option of coming in and reviewing that routing option. So if for some reason if for some reason the route that was originally selected is no longer viable, then I might come in here and reroute it. An example of when I might have to do this anyway is the system doesn't allow you to use a past dated routing. So let's say we entered a sales order that was supposed to ship last week. It had a transportation routing assigned to it, but then we didn't have it ready to ship on time. When I come to actually ship it, that past dated routing is no longer valid. I have to reroute it to make sure that I am still selecting a route that is going to get it to the customer on time. One way that I've got in here that this is something I like to do if a lot of the times we've got shipping making the decision on how we're going to route the shipment, rather than auto routing to a particular carrier up front, what you can do is set your best way carrier up as your most preferred routing, and then allow your shipping department downstream to select the actual carrier that you want to use. So these are all routes that would be allowable for me to use for this shipment. If the customer had a preferred carrier that would already have been selected, I can come in here and override that. Normally, if we're doing that Lite implementation, you wouldn't be seeing charges preloaded in here. Typically, if you're doing a Lite implementation, that implies that you're going to be manually entering those payable and billable charges, and you don't have to do both. If you just want to record billable charges and you don't care about payable charges, you don't have to put them in there. If you want to get the functionality, but you don't care about recording freight through this process at all, it's not required to put those charges in at any point in the process. But what you'll see here is some of these routes, they do have payable and billable charges. And a lot of my clients that are doing a Lite implementation, they do still have lanes that are established, and they know that when I'm shipping from point A to point B, I always want to use a particular carrier, and these are my pre-negotiated rates for it. So you can very, very simply set up those regular shipping lanes to default for those routes and to have your agreed shipping charges in there if you want to do that. All right, so I'm not going to change my routing here. The other thing that I wanted to show you is that we've got the capability, as soon as that shipment is created, to come in and manage its shipment data, but this is also related to the sales order. So if I looked right now at all of the sales order lines that are on this shipment, they will all show a promised ship date of 11/5, and they will all show a promised delivery date of 11/6. Let's imagine that I've got 15 different sales orders that I've consolidated onto one shipment, and for some reason my truck isn't going to come in and I need to change my promised ship and my promised delivery date. Rather than going into all 15 of those sales orders and updating all of the lines that are on this shipment, what I can do is I can change the dates here at the shipment level, and then it'll automatically push those date changes back to all of the sales order lines that are on this shipment. So it's a really easy way to make one change at the shipment and push it back to the sales order. And you can also do that if you want to change the mode of transport, the carrier number. So let's say your customer has a preferred carrier that's defaulted in from the customer master, but all of a sudden those trucks aren't available. You can come in here, you can change the carrier number that's going to be assigned to the shipment, and it would push back to all of the sales order lines that are associated to this shipment number. I mentioned that one of the things that we get from using transportation is a place to record pickups and deliveries. And this doesn't really have a ton of functionality except giving you a place to record the data. So this isn't going to show up on a calendar view or anything like that. But if you do know that you have a carrier that's coming in to pick up on a certain date, you can record that in here, and you've also got the capability to record an appointment time. Ditto if you're making delivery appointments for drop-off of this product. Okay, so we have a shipment that, I didn't show you the freight charges, so let's take a look at that now. Now, this is going to have come in automatically because the route that got assigned to the shipment I'm laying, it actually didn't pull them in. So this is going to give me the capability to enter my freight charges here. So this one did not have it automatically set up. And you'll see that I've got a payable charge and I've got a billable charge. So I have to enter them separately. Without small enhancement to the system, it won't let you enter both at the same time. If you are dealing with a carrier that works in foreign currency, then you'll see foreign currency amounts populated in here based on exchange rates. And if it is a foreign currency carrier, you can enter in foreign currency and it will calculate back to your company currency. You'll see here charge codes. When we get in the next webinar into more detail on configuration, this charge code is tied to a GL class code. So this is going to give you control over where dollars associated with your payable freight charges are going to get written. And then if I come back in and do my billable freight charges, so I'm manually marking this up. If you're actually using full system functionality, you can have the system mark it up for you. And you'll see here, my charge code, I've got a different charge code, and that in the background is associated to a different GL class code. So my payable GL class code and my billable GL class code are different. And I can do the same thing when I get into those additional accessorial type charges. Each one of those can have its own charge code tied to its own GL class code associated to it. And then shipping documents. So if I come in here, one of my options is to go into delivery documents. And this is driven off an advanced preference, something else that I'll get into the configuration on the next webinar. But for this customer, so this isn't an export route. The only required pieces of shipping documentation for this shipment are a bill of lading and a shipment manifest. So based on the setup, it's telling me that for this branch, this customer, and it can also be based on product type, here are the documents that I need to generate. It takes any guesswork out on the part of the shipper. I can also change it. So if I just want to do a one-off document, perhaps I just want to come in here and generate a packing list, or somebody managed to tear up the bill of lading and I need to reprint a bill of lading. I've got the ability to come back in here and generate a single document. I can also, on the fly, if I want to, select an additional document that I might want to output at the same time as this. So for example, maybe I want to do a packing list. If you are using delivery documents, you could be using this to generate pallet labels. You could be using it to generate shipping labels. You can basically set up anything that you can launch a batch program in the background to go generate the output can be driven off of these delivery documents. So let me submit that. I'm going to take a few seconds for those to run. Okay, so I see that it generated my bill of lading, and the documents we're looking at here are the out-of-the-box canned JD Edwards documents, so they are not very pretty. But you'll see here that it generated my bill of lading for that shipment. And then it also generated a shipment manifest. And so those documents, just using standard setup, can be routed to whichever printer you want them to print to, based on either the batch program or the combination of the batch program and the role or the specific user. Now, sometimes when we're generating those documents, they are going to automatically create shipment reference numbers. So a good example would be a bill of lading number is typically going to need to be stored alongside the shipment. So sitting in the background behind my shipment, are my shipment reference numbers. So there's two ways that I can come into this. One is I can come in as an inquiry view, and one way is I can come in an edit view. So here I'm coming in an inquiry view, and for this particular shipment, what I've got recorded right now is my bill of lading number. So somewhere in the background of my delivery document setup, I've got one little piece missing, because what I should have in here is a reference qualifier that identifies this as being my bill of lading number. If my shipment manifest was set up to output a unique next number, I would also see that reflected in here. And I've also got the capability then to have a place, if I do need to come in and manually enter any shipment reference numbers, I can do that. So for example, if the driver shows up and I need to record a pro number, if I need to record seal numbers, I can come in here and I can manually do that. Or alternatively, if you're using RF scanning, that's a place where you could be scanning a barcode and have a script or an orchestration that would upload that information to the table. If you're integrated to small parcel shipping solutions, you can have those tracking numbers written back into this table. And one of my favorite Cafe ones to set up is for customer service, where they need to be able to get a customer that is calling with a bill of lading number and be able to identify which shipment and which sales orders that bill of lading ties back to. So from sales order entry, you can create sales order inquiry, you can create a Cafe One page where you can do a search on shipment number and then have the ability both to identify what your shipment and then your sales order number is. You can also allow customer service from that Cafe One page to do an interactive update to those shipment reference numbers. So I've been at companies where customer service is responsible for retroactively entering some shipment reference numbers into the system. You can do that without having to go all the way through the transportation screens by having a Cafe One page set up where you can manually key in those shipment reference numbers. Okay, so at this point, we have approved our shipment, routed it, picked it, put shipment charges on it. Really all that's left to do at this point is to ship confirm it and run the freight update program to add the freight charges to the sales order. So let me get back to my work with shipment screen. I'm going to go ahead and ship confirm this order. Well, this shipment, because it's actually multiple sales orders. As always, if you need to backdate, not best practice, but if you need to backdate that shipment, if you don't have shippers that are working in JD Edwards at night, but you do have shipments going out, you're able to backdate that ship date. And then from the front end transportation ship confirmation, it's going to take you into your regular P4205 shipment confirmation. You can still do batch shipment confirmation on these. There is a transportation batch shipment confirmation that then launches the regular batch shipment confirmation in the background. So I've still got the capability in here to decide that something isn't shipping at this point. Maybe as I was loading stuff onto the trailer, I couldn't fit everything onto the trailer. So now I'm not going to ship everything. So I can still make my normal shipment confirmation changes in here. I'm going to go ahead and confirm everything. And now I see that my status on my shipment updated. It's indicating it's at a status 70. If I go back to my sales order, as you would expect, it updated the status. So 575 is the out-of-the-box status that's normally used for the freight update program. And what's going to happen when we run freight update is it's going to look at the freight handling code that was associated to that shipment. And if you look at the UDC table for the freight handling code, and hopefully I remember the right one here because I didn't look this up. 42 maybe. There we go. All right, so if I look at my freight handling code values, the special handling code is what controls what happens when we run the freight update program. So if I have prepaid and add freight, then I would typically want to go ahead and add that onto the sales order. If I have collect freight, I don't want to recognize anything payable or billable related to those freight charges. So this special handling code controls what happens when I run the freight update program, whether I'm going to create records on the payable side and or whether I'm going to add freight onto the sales order. If you request the slide deck, I do have a screenshot in there that shows you what those different codes mean. So I'm going to run my freight update program. And typically speaking, you would have this running on scheduler sometime between when you finish shipping and when you're generating your invoices. I'm going to run it for that particular shipment number, but normally you would run this based on shipment value, shipment status. I'd normally pick up everything that is at a shipment status 70, meaning I've been ship confirmed, but I haven't had freight update run yet. And that is going to launch my freight update program. So this is the R4981. And so this is showing me that my freight update completed. This is recording what is going on the accounts payable side. So this, if you remember, was my payable freight amount was my $75. And I'm not an accountant, so I've got to be honest, what it does with the rest of the account numbers underneath it, I really don't know. But this is breaking it out based on the item numbers that are on those sales order lines on that shipment. If I look at my shipment status now, it's going to have updated to a shipment status 80. So if you remember in the beginning, I showed you that my warehouse view was only looking at status 15 through 70. Once it's gone through freight update, we really don't care about it, so it disappears from view. In this additional selections tab, if for some reason I did need to come in here and look at one that has completed the entire process, I would be able to manually change that, and I would be able to see that that shipment went all the way through final freight update. And then on the sales order side, now that is going to have added a freight line. And just to call out here, so this is something that you have to be aware of if you're consolidating shipments, is the freight gets added onto the first sales order that was on that shipment. So this kind of assumes if you're adding freight that when you're delivering to a particular destination, that it's always a single customer that is involved in that destination. If you're sharing ship to numbers across multiple customers, then you kind of have to be a bit careful about how you would go about adding freight if you're doing shipment consolidation. But you see I've got a freight line on here, and now all of my lines are ready to invoice. Okay, so let me hop back to my slide deck here. So that's kind of like an introduction to some of the basic things that transportation can do for you. I think my two biggest things, aside from the actual freight piece of it, is it takes the guesswork out for warehouse and shipping about when they should be working with shipments and what they should be doing. So you can put status changes in there on the shipment side for as many different process steps as you need people to have visibility to in the warehouse and shipping side. Particularly if you're using RF scanning or if you have a custom packing list, you can have those processes kick off a shipment status update so that you can identify when certain process steps have been completed. And in the age of orchestrations, pretty much any time you are executing a process in JD Edwards, you've got the ability to kick off an orchestration on the back of it, which would make doing that status update really easy. So I said that you can start off with a very, very light implementation of transportation and get the use out of the features that are most going to improve efficiency for your organization. But as you grow into it, some things to think about. First of all, you can have full rating and routing capability. You can go all the way from, I don't have freight rates on any of my transportation routes that are in the system, and I'm going to do it all manually, all the way to either I'm integrated to an external system and I'm going to pull those rates in real time, or I'm going to store rates in my system and automatically apply those billable and payable freight charges. Another big consideration, you can use this for inbound transportation and you can get the same benefits that you do from the outbound sales order side of things. So you can very easily use this to help manage inbound purchase orders. When you're using transportation, you have the ability to differentiate between using a ship to address number and a deliver to address number. So if you have situations where you're dealing with exports and maybe you need to apply taxes based on whatever the final destination of the shipment is going to be, but you're only having responsibility for transportation to the freight forwarder, you really want to be able to designate my end ship to is that end customer site. Where I'm delivering to is that freight forwarder. So you have the ability to use the deliver to as the basis of consolidating those shipments instead of just using the ship to. You can set up rules, and this is something that I'll show when we get into the next webinar and we look at configuration. You can set up rules so that based on either shipment weight or shipment volume, you can set up rules for a container type of what the maximum is that's allowed to go in there, including maximum piece weights or piece volumes. And that can cause the system to automatically create new shipments. So for example, if you enter a sales order and you really need 3 trucks to ship it, you can identify that at the point of sales order entry. Automatic routing based on transit times and required delivery date. I actually think that that's something that fits very well within the transportation Lite setup. And I mentioned the fact that you can update your sales order data without needing to access to P4210 and P42101. So sometimes you really do need the warehouse to be able to make a change to a promised ship date or a promised delivery date. You don't want them going into sales order entry to do it. If you give them security to do it, they can use the shipment application and make those updates back to the sales order. You've got the capability to do load building. So if not just consolidating shipments for the same customer, the same destination, if you need to coordinate routes where you're picking up from multiple facilities, you're dropping at multiple facilities for different customers, you've got the capability to get into some very complex load building capability. It ties in with fleet management. So if you're running your own trucks or your own delivery vehicles, you've got the capability to tie transportation in with your own fleet setup, which in turn will connect into to asset management. I talked a little bit about advanced preferences versus transportation date management and the fact that if you're using transportation, your advanced preference dates for prep days and transit days, they no longer work. So that is a factor, and you've got a lot more flexibility to set up those dates based on the actual routes that are getting assigned rather than having a one-size-fits-all for that customer origin and destination. I showed you picking by shipment. So if you are consolidating sales orders onto a shipment, you've got the capability to drive pick by shipment and sales order date management. So this is kind of a thumbs down one, is if you do have past due sales order lines that you are now rerouting to get a current route assigned to them, it does reset your sales order dates. And unfortunately, that also includes your scheduled pick date, which I'm not a fan of. So that does mean that if you're not keeping your sales order dates updated ahead of time, if you're retrospectively routing a past due shipment, you lose visibility in the 4211 to what the original dates were in those fields. It can cause a little bit of consternation when it comes to measuring on-time shipments. And that is all I've got for you today. So that is kind of the introduction to Transportation Lite. If you are interested in getting your hands on the slide, you can scan the QR code. If watching this webinar has left you with questions and maybe you want some input on how this could be relevant to your business, my email is here, bdanamiller@terillium.com. If you want to, when you fill out the form to request the slide deck, you can put a note in there if you would like a follow-up contact. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it. And I hope you'll tune in for the next webinar.